Top 10 most valuable and historically important Marvel comics of the year 1963. These are all key major books, all very valuable, hard to find in high grade. Let's count them down. Number 10 most valuable of the year is Amazing Spider-Man. Number 4, it also ranks 23rd most valuable Marvel comic of the entire decade of the 1960s. This was the 73rd Marvel Silver Age superhero comic put out since they started with Fantastic Four #1. Only less than 2 years earlier. The Sandman makes his first appearance and origin in this issue, and we also have the first appearance of Betty Brant and Liz Allen, both love interests for Peter Parker. We've got Steve Ditko artwork, print run estimated at a low 175,000 copies. The title wasn't that popular yet. On the CGC census, we see that there are over 2,200 copies now graded, lots of demand for this title, but only 3 ranking 9.6 or higher on the CGC census. Heritage Auctions has sold a whopping 435 copies since the year 2000 when they started selling comics online. We've got this great cover, 12-cent cover price, comics code stamped in the corner. And in the Overstreet annual price guide, if we compare the growth year by year, in all grades, you can see the growth this book has had. This book has not yet doubled in lower grades in this long time span. And in this time span, you can see the book has just about tripled in high grades for raw copies. On the CGC census, we can see there are 3 9.6s and 8 9.4s, and there's also a UK price pence variant, the highest copy being graded an 8.0. The number 9 comic of the year is also an issue of Amazing Spider-Man. It's issue number 3. It's the first appearance of Doc Ock, better known as Dr. Octopus. He would later become one of Spider-Man's biggest villains ever. And we have Flash Thompson and J. Jonah Jameson appearing in this issue early on. Again, print run estimated 175,000 copies. We've got Steve Ditko art. Ranks 9th of the year and 22nd of the decade. Again, the CGC census is really growing as Amazing Spider-Man is the most popular and collected title of any Marvel title. So we have almost 2,000 copies graded, 11 9.6s or higher. This book a little more common. And Heritage has sold 378 copies of this book. And there's Doc Ock on the cover in the shadows. In the Overstreet price guide, we can see in the last 17 years, the book has doubled in lower grades. And again, it has basically tripled in high grades for raw copies, now a $12,500 book. On the census, amazingly, there are 2 9.8s and 9.6s existing of this book. Number 8 rank of the year is Fantastic Four, number 12. This is the 38th Marvel Silver Age hero comic ever put out. It's the first meeting of the Fantastic Four and the Hulk. We have the 7th appearance of the Hulk, and now the Hulk's ongoing solo series has now been canceled. So now he starts to make crossover appearances. This issue came out at the same time on the newsstands as Amazing Spider-Man #1, ranks 8th of the year and 18th of the decade. There are 1,445 copies currently graded by CGC, 6 9.6s or higher. Heritage 291 copies. White background cover makes this one a tough one in high grade. In the Overstreet price guide, lots of demand for this book. The book has not yet tripled in low grades, but it has almost gone up 5 times in high grades raw. On the census, there are 6 9.6s and 16 9.4s. Ranking number 7 of the year is Sgt Fury and his Howling Commandos, #1. This book is very valuable. Despite being a war comic, it has later ties into the Marvel superhero universe, which is why there's so much demand for this book. Smaller print run because it is a war title. And yes, it's got Jack Kirby cover art. So lots of reasons to collect this book. It does feature Sgt Fury 2 years before he would become Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. It ranks 7th of the year and 17th of the decade. Print run estimated at 200,000 copies. On the census, we have 872 copies graded by CGC, which is not as many as the other superhero books. There are absolutely no 9.6s or higher of this book in existence. Heritage has now sold 315 copies. On the Overstreet annual price guide, we can see growth has definitely been strong in this book. This book has more than tripled in this time frame. And believe it or not, it's gone up almost 7 times in high grade. Used to be undervalued, now it's catching up. On the census, the highest graded copies, there are 7 9.4s and 4 9.2s. Next on our ranking is Amazing Spider-Man #2 in 6th place. It is the 2nd issue of the series. It is the first appearance of the Vulture and the Terrible Tinkerer, and its 3rd appearance ever of Spider-Man. We have art by Steve Ditko. Print run estimated 175,000 copies, ranked 6th of the year, 15th of the decade. We have almost 2,000 copies, again, graded by CGC. There are 5 9.6s or higher. Heritage has sold almost 400 copies of this great action cover. In the Overstreet price guide, the book has almost doubled in low grades in this time frame. You can see this book definitely stalled for a while, about a decade ago in lower grades. High grades, it's moved up $10,000, which is about 2.5 times. And on the census, there is 1 9.8 and 4 9.6s. There are 31 copies graded of the UK price variant, but no high grade copies at all. Number 5 of the year. Now we're getting into the major expensive books. Strange Tales 110 is the first appearance of Doctor Strange in a backup feature. Therefore, he's not featured on the cover of this issue, which was the story drawn by Steve Ditko. And this issue also features the first appearance of the Ancient One. We've got Jack Kirby cover art of the Human Torch. This is the 10th issue featuring the Human Torch in solo stories. Print run estimated 189,000 copies. This was one of Marvel's best-selling kind of monster titles at the time, but now it's becoming a superhero title. Ranks 5th of the year and 11th of the decade. 1,700 copies graded by CGC in all grades combined, but there are 6 9.6s or higher. Heritage has sold 270 copies of this book. In the Overstreet price guide, lots of demand because when they announced that there would be Doctor Strange movies, prices skyrocketed on this title, especially around 2013. You can really see gigantic movement on this book. So in this time frame, in the last 18 years, you can see the book has gone up 6.5 times in low grade, and it's gone up over 10 times in high grade for this book, yet still underpriced at $21,000. On the census, we have 6 9.6s and 14 9.4s. There is a UK price variant. The highest graded copy is an 8.5. Now we jump into the big books for sure. Avengers #1 ranks in 4th place of the year. Of course, there's a series of Avengers movies that have broken box office records around the world, and this is where the team starts. First appearance of the Avengers team, iconic classic cover, Jack Kirby interior artwork. The team originally consisted of many of Stan Lee's greatest creations. We've got Iron Man, the Hulk, Thor, Wasp, and Ant-Man, all in one book. This was on the newsstands the same month as Xmen #1. This print run estimated at 200,000 copies, ranks 4th of the year and 10th most valuable Marvel comic of the 1960s. This is a major book. Over 3,400 copies graded by CGC, yet only 5 9.6s or higher. Heritage Auctions has sold over 600 copies of this classic book. In the Overstreet price guide, lots of demand as well. Those movies really drove up the prices. Always a consistent mover. You can see that in this 17-year span, the book has almost quadrupled in low grades, and in high grade, it has gone up 10 times its price. It's had a little resistance just in the last couple of years now that it's got quite pricey, but of course it's guaranteed to keep rising. On the census, there are 5 9.6s and 12 9.4s. UK price variants exist, and the highest grade is an 8.5. The #3 book of the year, Tales of Suspense, #39, normally a monster book, but with this issue, the creation of Iron Man. And we have a Jack Kirby cover here, story by Stan Lee, and print run estimated 180,000 copies. ranks 3rd of the year, and more impressively, 7th of the entire decade. 1,800 copies graded by CGC, but only 6 9.6s or higher. Heritage has sold 356 copies. Overstreet Price Guide, I show bigger growth here. Look at this. Going back to 1975, hard to believe that a low-grade copy was only $14, and now it costs you over $2,000. Steady growth over the years. It has stalled just short time period back in 2012, but it's been strong every other year. So overall, if we look at, say, the last 20 years, we can see the book has gone up about 8 times in low grade, which is huge growth. And in the last 20 years in highest grade, the book has gone up about 14 times. Very impressive. And again, look at the growth since the early Overstreet Price Guides. On the census, we have 1 9.8 and 5 9.6s. There is a UK price variant, but there are no high-grade copies at all. Number 2 of the year, Xmen #1. This is the first appearance of the entire original X-Men team created by Stan Lee, art by Jack Kirby. Print run estimated 175,000 copies, ranks number 2 of the year and 6 of the entire decade. Almost 4,000 copies graded by CGC, 6 9.6s or higher. Heritage has sold over 600 copies. Creamy white background. A lot of copies have Marvel chipping for books of this era. Very hard to find in high grade. In the Overstreet Price Guide over this 17-year period, you can see the book has always been a steady mover. It did stall actually for a couple of years, believably, back in 2011 in lower grades. Overall, in this time span, you can see the book has gone up triple in low grades, but it's done better in high grades. The high grades are moving at a faster pace, and now it's about 6 times growth in higher grades. Raw. On the census, there are 2 9.8s and 4 9.6s. There's a bunch of UK price variants graded, the highest being a 9.2. And that brings us to the #1 most important and valuable Marvel comic of 1963, Amazing Spider-Man #1, the 37th Marvel Silver Age superhero comic put out. Spider-Man gets his own title, and this is 7 months after first appearing in Amazing Fantasy 15. Popular, and so Stan Lee brought the character back, gave him his own title with a big relaunch with the Fantastic Four guest appearing in this issue. This issue also features the first appearances of J. Jonah Jameson and the Chameleon. We've got Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, and Stan Lee working on this book, the iconic classic Marvel creative team. It's the #1 comic of the year and #5 of the entire decade. Again, the CGC census is growing quickly on this book. Everybody's getting their copies graded. There's almost 3,000 copies graded, but only 6 9.6s or higher. Heritage has sold over 600 copies. Look at the other books that were on the newsstands at the same time. Fantastic Four 12, Tales to Astonish 41, The Hulk #6, Journey into Mystery 90, Tales to Astonish 39, and Strange Tales 106. In the Overstreet Price Guide, here's a complete ranking back to the very first price guide in 1970. You could buy a low-grade copy for $12. Now it'll cost you almost $3,000 50 years later. In just the last 10 years alone, you can see the book has doubled in low grades. In the last 10 years in the high grade, the book has not yet doubled, but it's quickly approaching that. In the last 50 years, you can see the original first Overstreet Price Guide. You could buy a mint copy of this book for $16. But at the time, that was considered high because at that time, comics were still only 15 cents cover price. So that was a very expensive book at the time. You could have bought 100 new comics off the newsstands or this one back issue high grade comic. On the CGC census, there is a 9.8 and 5 9.6s. There's a bunch of UK price variants graded, the highest being an 8.5. And there's a few of the rare Mexican edition graded, but no high grade copies at all. Now, let's compare the top 10 on the CGC census to kind of see what's rare, which ones are people more speculating on. And what do we find on the chart? Well, the most common book on the list is actually X-Men #1 with almost 4,000 copies graded. After that, we've got Avengers #1 with 3,400 copies. And then we have Amazing Spider-Man #1. So it appears that Amazing Spider-Man #1 is actually proving that it is truly a bit harder a book to find. And that would be true because it came out 6 months earlier and just not as many copies saved in general by collectors yet. If we look at the books that have the highest grades, there actually is very lucky 5 books on this top 10 that actually have a 9.8 copy. The book with the least high grade copies is Sgt Fury, #1, being a war title. Less high grade copies have been saved and hoarded over the years. So there you go, 10 classic books, some of the most important Marvel comics ever published for the year 1963. This series continues every week, so please subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching.